Coming up on Mount Hermeneutics, we're talking Gnostics, Gnosticism. What is it? Is it something that was early Christian? Sounds like the boogeyman if you're reading into the second century. Whatever it is, we're going to talk about it and we'll let you decide. So keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck. So if you listened to the show last week and you thought Brian was a bumbling idiot, now you know why. Now you know.
I kind of feel like that's fair. Like I kind of was a bumbling idiot. But what is faith? Find out exclusively here at Mount Hermeneutics. Nowhere else. If anyone else who tells you what faith is, they're full of crap. Listen to us.
Very well. Remember that Mount Hermeneutics is free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, especially if you're seeing our faces right now. And if you are seeing our faces, why don't you just subscribe? For some reason, a lot of people are watching our show in the stats and they're not subscribed. So subscribe, ring the bell, be part of it. And if you hate on us, subscribe again. And then tell us why you hate us all the time. I love hatred.
We feed on it.
I feel it feels good. And if it's your first time with us, I am Andre. That's Brian. That's Matt. Phyllis, what's happening?
What's up?
It's good to be home.
Happy Pride Month, guys.
Hey.
I saw an interesting graphic where all of the usual suspect companies did not pridify their logos this year.
It's a Pride Month miracle. It's it's great.
I saw somebody said Happy Pride Month to the one Republican senator who voted against the NAFTA bill the ATF bill to take suppressors off the Schedule 2 list, and to everybody else, happy June.
Oh, that's kind of yeah. That's gonna go down in history as like a classic.
That's like good on
insult.
Like lots of levels. Like that's
yeah.
Kind of like the Sting and Company, the fuck NWA shirt. That was
a clever meme.
It's like, wait, what?
I'm like, why don't these white guys like NWA? What'd they ever do to the? Oh, that's Sting. Okay,
you should probably explain that to the listeners because they didn't see the meme we saw.
Oh, they will.
Are you gonna post it up?
Yeah,
okay,
yes. I'll put it in the show.
So in case people don't know, there was a band in the early '80s with a front man that played bass. His name was Sting. He was also in that wonderful flick called Dune.
Yep, he was Fade Routha.
Yeah, he was. And yeah, not so good. But yeah. So they're the police, and NWA wants to F them. And they took it personal, so they sent it back.
They're like Michael Jordan.
And I took that personal, so I created my own merch. So it's pretty good. So
we're all
it's been a couple of weeks.
Getting back. Yeah, we're getting back from being in San Diego for Andre's birthday party. So that was fun.
Yeah, that was a good time.
It was really nice. I think my gay He-Man is in my car. I'm upset that I didn't bring it out for the show.
I'm a little hurt that you don't have it on display.
I meant to. I'm Adam, Prince of Eternia, and I have this haircut and I wear purple tights.
Fabulous magic powers were revealed to me.
Fabulous magic powers.
Speaking of Pride Month.
I know, it's my Pride He-Man.
He came with a little gay pride float too.
Yeah, now he did. And this show is completely getting demonetized. That's what happened.
It's okay. It's Pride Month. We're
leaning into it.
Yeah,
we should hashtag Pride Month inside our
we should do that.
Our YouTube.
Done.
We will.
We're out of control. I just offended my daughter. That's awesome. So But yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you for coming out and seeing me for a few days.
Oh, for sure.
That
Yeah,
was
thanks for
really
having us.
nice. I just basically I had 4 days at the beach. I had a couple of villas. I had some friends from out of state, like these two characters, a couple of guys from our other chat groups. They're black, and they came, and that was fun. And then I had lots of like just family and friends. And Bundy, we won't forget about you, James. I'm glad that you were there. And after Brian moved out, James moved into his room. So the next night, the young lady
James, let
with
me
her
tell you
first
something.
with
Let me tell you
her
something.
with her first night, she felt great for sure. For sure she felt great.
Yeah, I bet she had a rough day.
Yeah, bless her heart.
Yeah.
So,
Speaking of blessed hearts, early Christianity was all over the map, wasn't it? It was
Uh,
just, I mean,
I don't think I agree with that characterization, but I'm going to let you keep
why is
going.
that? Why do you agree with that characterization?
Well, I think the level of diversity is wildly overstated by the likes of Bart Ehrman and other modern, frankly, enemies of Christianity.
they were so on the same page that they didn't have to all get together at a couple of ecumenical councils and yell and scream at each other for days to get on the
And
same
church fathers
page.
didn't have to write
Well,
volumes and volumes against this heresy?
Like
300
specifically against heresy.
300 years after the birth of Christianity, they had an ecumenical council. And and like we've said before, you have to have a lot of agreement on certain fundamentals before you're even in a position to argue. Like
Sure.
Republicans and Democrats will agree on paper, at least, that the Constitution is binding. Without that prior agreement, something to argue about. And what's interesting is that the early Christians, you didn't really have a lot of heated arguments about what scriptures were authoritative,
Why do you say that?
because it didn't happen. I mean, the
What do you mean it
earliest,
didn't happen? How do you know it didn't happen? I mean, you could
because
say that you could speculate that it might not have happened, but to say that you know that it didn't happen, you got to explain that.
well, there's no record of it happening until like Marcion in Rome, and that was one pocket of Christianity, and what he was doing was quite obviously a, an attempt to redefine. It was one man and his followers who were trying to basically create their own canon. There's really no need for Christians to ratify a canon, except until in Rome when Marcion did that. And for the listeners, the Marcionite heresy, this isn't exactly on topic for Gnosticism, but it's sort of Gnostic
Oh,
adjacent.
we'll get to it. We'll get to Marcion for sure, because
Um,
Marcionism is one of the Gnostic sects, definitely.
well,
Well, well,
it's not exactly Gnosticism, but it's like
That's interesting.
I'm not protective enough of Gnosticism as a category that I care to argue it. But my point is, like, there was pretty much universal agreement that the four Gospels and Acts are scriptural. All of Paul's letters, there was some dispute over Second Peter and Revelation. Some people thought the Shepherd of Hermas should be in there. Some people thought the Epistle of Barnabas should be in there, stuff like that. But overall, there wasn't really any. Some people included the Didache in the Bible.
then there's
And
the Ethiopians.
And Thomas,
But I mean,
I don't,
I,
I don't
I,
think anybody included Thomas in the
I,
canon.
okay.
my question is it that nobody was including these other books or canon was an issue, or just nobody was willing to have a fight over it? And everybody was kind of being laissez-faire about we don't really
Or the
care what other
fight
people are
was
doing.
never written down and nobody saw the fight because it was completely suppressed.
So is there any particular reason to think there was a fight?
Yeah, the entire Nag Hammadi library, which we have like one thing that survives from some of that stuff. And after they
Hey
went around
Dre,
burning the
Dre,
books. What's up?
for the sake of listeners, do you want to back
We'll,
up
we'll go.
and
We'll
yeah,
get into it. I'll get into what the Nag Hammadi
yeah,
library is
yeah.
Okay. Well,
for sure.
Okay, well, I think me interrupting you disrupted
No, I'm no,
your main.
I like this conversation because it'll. I mean, we'll get to. I was looking at notes and Sting's T-shirt just popped up on my phone, and then I was like, "F Gnosticism." That's what
The
that's
algorithm is real. It
so
lives.
it's totally real. So I guess what is Gnosticism? From what you have a definition, Brian? What do you think Gnosticism is?
The standard answer is that there's no one set of ideas that is Gnosticism. It wasn't like a formal sect with established creeds. It's characterized by certain tendencies. They tended to well, first the term Gnostic is from the Greek knowledge. The teaching was that salvation came in the form of secret knowledge that was given to you by the sect, or bestowed upon you supernaturally. And salvation was defined in terms of their worldview was to make a strict distinction between spirit and matter, between spirit and flesh. Flesh was considered intrinsically corrupt, while only spirit was good. And so they frame Jesus as being. What's interesting is that the first heresy, the first Christological heresy, at least, was
I like that phrase. I've never heard that before.
Christological
A
heresy.
Christological heresy. I
Yeah,
like
it's a
that.
real word. I didn't make that
No,
up.
I'm digging it.
But
Hashtag.
it was not as is popularly supposed that Jesus was not divine or that he was only a man. The first Christological heresy was that Jesus was not human at all because they believed he was divine. Being divine, he can't have a physical material existence because physicality and materiality are definitionally corrupt. So he only appeared to in human form. He was this sort of incorporeal phantom. And there's different ways that Gnostics treated this. Some made a distinction between Christ the spirit and Jesus the man. They believe that Christ came upon Jesus. He became the Christ at his baptism when the Spirit came upon him. And then when he was crucified, the Spirit left him so that only the flesh suffered, but the Spirit was gone. But the earliest version which we can gather from First John was that he had no fleshly component at all. He was just an incorporeal phantom. That's why the Apostle John wrote the that any spirit that says that Jesus has not come in the flesh is not from God. I think that's in First John chapter 4, and he kind of alludes to this in the opening chapter when he says, "The life appeared to us, that which was from the beginning, which we have seen, which we have looked at with our eyes and touched with our hands concerning the word of life." Like he's emphasizing the physical, material, tactile nature of Jesus Christ in opposition to this heresy that he wasn't fully human. Um, so
So
what
he
else
was
am I?
saying he wasn't fully human ever or after the resurrection.
There's both.
The Gnostics were the heresy that the Apostle John in First John was opposing was the claim that Jesus was not human. He only
Ever.
appeared ever. Like
Oh.
we don't really know exactly. Because he doesn't give us the details. He's just opposing the idea
Right.
that Jesus was not in the flesh. I'm sure there were nuances to the position of his opposition that we don't know about, but most people think this was the beginnings of the Gnostic heresy. Um, and it would
Yeah, I don't even know if it's the beginnings of the Gnostic heresy. I think it was smack dab in the middle. I think the Gnostics were, even if they weren't as big, it was early, and that's why some of the early church fathers like Tertullian, Athanasius, Irenaeus of Leon, he they did a lot of anti-Gnostic writings. And for until like the 1900s, the only thing we knew about Gnostics was that opposition writing. So in our own canon, you had First John that talked about them. Um, some think that John, the Gospel of John, has a lot of polemicy on the Gospel of Thomas. Doubting Thomas. Thomas is kind of a buffoon. When Jesus says, you know where I'm going to go," and Thomas is the first guy to say, "We don't know where you're going to go," and that's kind of a thing saying, "Yeah, you don't know. You don't have gnosis, Thomas," because Thomas is kind of a contemporary sayings uh, literature that it's contemporary with the Gospels themselves. Um,
Hmm.
and we really didn't have anything out of the Gnostics' mouths themselves until about 1945. And some things were a little bit earlier, but really that Nag Hammadi library is where they got to kind of voice their own thing, where you were no longer reading Tertullian's against the heresies and against Valentinus. You were no longer reading Irenaeus and his 5-volume work against heresies.
You got to read the
Mostly
heresy directly.
you get to read the you get to see the heresy for your damn self.
So what is the
Even
Nag? What's
Clemens
Nag Hammadi?
I'll
Where
get
did it
the,
come from?
so in 1945, a Bedouin by the name of Muhammad Ali, not the one that you put is the
Not
greatest of all time,
not
not the
Cassius
goat
Clay.
Muhammad Ali, but Muhammad
Not the
Ali.
goat, but a goat herder named Muhammad
Correct,
Ali.
correct. So he's scavenging around somewhere near the Nile, and he's digging, and he finds a canister. He thinks he finds buried treasure because with the age of it, there's a little gold glimmer. So my man's excited. He pulls that out there and finds that it's just paper. It's just old paper. Then he brings it back. In fact, he brings it back, and his mom is like, "Oh, sweet kindling," and burns part of it.
Mm.
But
So it's like the Dead Sea Scrolls of heresy.
correct. Some would say that's the Scrolls of heresy. But uh, a little while later, Ali and his brother they go out to avenge their father's death. And this is legend.
As
No one
as
knows.
one does.
No one knows if this is true or not. They find the perpetrator of the person that murdered their father, and if anyone knows the story, hey, correct me if I'm wrong. They chop off his limbs and they eat his heart.
As one does.
As you do. But because they ate my man's heart, they thought that they're probably going to get arrested. So, so
Yeah, they should probably lay low for a while
yeah,
after
so
that.
they felt like was it Ron Artest and Jermaine O'Neal? Like
That's what I was thinking of.
it's like,
You
hey,
think we get to play tomorrow? You're gonna
man, we might
play.
not ever play again. So that's a sports ball reference. Hey,
Laid up against Brian's Anchorman reference, which was also well placed, by the way.
props to the Indiana Pacers, by the way, of making the NBA Finals. They'll be playing the
Yeah.
Oklahoma City Thunder
Yep.
in the NBA Finals that no one's gonna watch because it's two Midwest teams and no one gives a heck dang darn about. But it should be fun. Like two talented teams, and I might even watch 2 or 3 games. Who knows? Who knows? If it's close, I might watch the fourth quarter of all the games if it's close.
That makes sense.
But thinking that they're not gonna be around anymore, they gave what they found to a priest, and the priest
Oh,
is
this
like,
is
"What?"
post limb
Yeah,
cutting and heart eating.
yeah. They're like, "Oh man,
Okay.
we should probably see if these things are worth anything, because in case we need bail." And the priest is like, "Yeah," and they it ends up in an antiquities dealer, ends up in like Paris and New York, and finally eventually in 1956 it's repatriated back to Egypt, and it's in the Coptic library right now. But inside this codex of it's not, I mean, people will refer to it as like the Gnostic gospels or the Gnostic scriptures, when really it's just a library of just writings that some probably monastic monks in Egypt kind of just buried. Why they buried it, I don't know.
Right.
Might have the parchment paper that's used, how they aged it, the with carbon dating was the binding of the book itself. So they kind of back then they would take a bunch of parchment, kind of glue it together and stiffen it up, and that became like the leather bound book, like the Anchorman has. He has many leather bound books, and because they could age that, a few dates were kind of thrown out there: 340, 341, 345 ish of
AD, right?
AD of those copies. Uh, Dating the actual text itself is a little more tricky. Most think that it's between the second and the fourth century of writings that has to do with communities that kind of answered questions. Things that were found there were some gospels, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Truth, some
Not the Gospel of Thomas.
Gospel of Thomas was in there.
Was it Nag Hammadi?
Not the Gospel of Judas. Judas was not in there.
Oh, right,
So
right, right, right.
Gnostic Gospels, so the Gnostic Gospels, two of them that were not in the Nag Hammadi find, but were found later, was the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which is the only text attributed to a woman that we've found.
I thought the
And
Gospel of Mary was in Dead Sea Scrolls.
no,
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 the
definitely
the
because
the
it's not
the
Jewish.
Essenes were not Christians.
Uh, I could have sworn there was a fragment of the Gospel of Mary in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
No,
No.
the Essenes were a sect of Jews who they weren't Christians. Some people think John the Baptist might have been an Essene, but the Essenes
A lot of
themselves,
people think that Jesus might have been in the scene, but
well, not credibly, but
yeah, okay, says you. and and so in the Gospel of Judas, yes, that Judas, the kisser
The
Judas,
Jesus kisser?
the Jesus kisser, that guy, he had his own gospel. And I think later on I want to talk about that gospel because it's so bizarre. But so it's got some secret books like apocryphons, so some revelations. It's got some infancy gospels like the infancy gospel of Thomas that tells tales of Jesus as a child. Um, but most of it is just, I mean, you have a couple of different sects. You have the Valentinians, the Marcions, and the Sethites. The Sethian Gnostics are the ones that are probably the most prominent, the ones that their church fathers kind of attack because they're the ones that really believe in this duality and this the God of the Old Testament is actually a demon. So
a,
that's one of
a well,
the
a
demiurge, right?
demiurge.
Right. So so you're on mute,
What does
bro.
that? Yeah, what does that mean? Clarify that. What you guys just said.
So the demiurge were gods that came from the underworld, right? So kind of demon type characters that fashioned humanity. They didn't create it, they fashioned it.
They
And
shaped it
they
in some.
shaped it after the Adamus. That's the image they made it in. The Adamus is an angel that's like the proto Adam. So they fashioned man to be in the image of Adam, and that's when this fallen, corrupt world that you have to escape your body, and all the things that kind of Brian said earlier. The demiurge is the god of the Old Testament to these people, and
Okay.
Yeah,
Marcion is really
and
the one that pushed it the hardest.
demiurge literally means public worker, which has the connotation of being like demi people or urge worker from ergon, where we use for energy, the ability to do work. So demiurge, the connotation is of a builder, a construction worker.
Oh, okay.
So because he constructed the world, and this was understood to be in rebellion against the one true God who is pure spirit and who's sort of like the kind of the Platonic notion of God who is he's so perfect that directing his attention away from anything other than himself would be beneath him. So he basically just contemplates himself.
Platonic And just to clarify, Brian, when you say Platonic, you mean like Plato, Platonistic,
Right.
not Platonic, like two people,
No,
two
like we
adults
don't
that
Yeah,
don't have
he
sex
just
with
wants
each
to
other.
be friends.
I'm just clarifying for listeners.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
knew
yeah.
what you meant. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure
Yeah.
everybody could follow along.
Eh,
Because really, and this is why people think that Gnosticism was pretty early, is because they kind of took this Christ idea, and as it spread among Gentiles, it kind of mixed this Roman magic with Egyptian cosmology and uh what's the other element?
well, Platonic philosophy.
In
I mean,
philosophy, that's what the one we were just talking about. That's why I forgot it.
yeah.
So with this Platonic philosophy, this Greek philosophy, then you add a little bit of magic, you add a little bit of cosmology, and now you have Gnostic thought. Um, and the two kind of main leaders in the second century were Valentinus and Marcion. Valentinus is an interesting cat because he was a dude that was pretty proto-orthodox, other than some of his Gnostic thinking, kind of the father of this kind of esoteric thinking when it comes to Christ. um Irenaeus and Tertullian weren't very kind about him, but Clement of Alexandria knew him and knew the Valentinians and actually worshipped with him before. So he was a lot more gracious in his writings against the Valentinian heresy. A lot of it was just they had arguments on, well, yeah, you're going too far with this Jesus is a spirit thing. So it was interesting. And I think I don't know if it was Irenaeus or was it Tertullian that used a lot of terms like seduction. So apparently Valentinus was a good-looking dude and like seduced women, and really you never know if it's actually he seduced women in that sexual way or if it's because
Just he was a
he
good public speaker and he was charismatic.
well there's that he's a charismatic speaker for sure, but also he let women into the ministry. He let
Oh,
women hold billets. Women were part of
clearly
the
he's a heretic.
To
I mean,
seduce
obviously.
them.
So he seduced them into thinking that they could be like a man and actually
He's like
preach,
he's like a modern day male feminist who just like white knights feminist
which
so
is
he
which
can
is funny because when you read the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it's like the first feminist book like in history, maybe. So because kind of the
Yeah,
themes that
that
are
kind of
that are
makes
in
it
there, and
actually
it's
kind of makes sense.
which is ironic because the Gospel of Thomas is the opposite.
uh sure. Yeah, I think
Well,
we can talk about that.
he says that women are unfit for the kingdom of God and or something along those lines.
Well, not really.
Um,
It said when you become that, then you become a man, then you become, and really.
So the path to the kingdom is to lose
well,
your womanness and become a man,
well,
and then
Well, yeah,
he's
well, it kind of comes on the whole Pauline thought of you're no longer men or women or
oh,
you're angels, like you're no longer a slave, you're no longer this, everything is one. So it's kind of difference between the Gospel of Thomas and most Gnosticism is this oneness versus duality.
hmm.
Duality of like you have to leave this
So that's what, okay, so that's what the whole duality of Gnosticism is referring to, is the spirit versus the body thing.
okay.
yes.
Okay, because
Here's what the
I've heard you guys talking about Gnosticism before, and with the duality thing, I thought it had to do with like it was like a take on the two powers in heaven or something like that. I didn't realize
no, it's
it was more
substance
human. It's
duality.
human focused.
Spirit
Okay.
versus
It's
matter.
spirit versus matter.
Okay. Got
But
it.
in the Gospel of Thomas, it reads, there's a saying 114. Simon
Mhm.
Peter said to them, "Let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life." Jesus said, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." Um,
So it's
Or,
so
like,
or or was that Jesus like, hey, Peter, shut up, fine, she's a male. Whatever it takes for you to think this.
or he was the first pro-trans
Maybe
uh
that's what it
apostle.
is. That maybe
Huh. Yeah,
Jesus?
that
Jesus
didn't
is?
occur to me. But yeah, happy Pride Month, guys. It's
That's interesting.
yeah.
I can't
So
understand why that didn't make it into the canon.
yeah.
So this is just to kind of recap, and I'm wildly off balance with this topic because the two of you are like Gnostic SMEs, and I have like literally no background or other than listening to you guys talk about it before. I don't really have
I,
any basis in Gnosticism. But if to recap, just from a literary point of view, is it fair to say that Gnosticism was happening somewhere between the first and third centuries? It was largely uh, shut down by the church fathers, which led to their writings being suppressed, lost, etc. And so the only, Dre, what you were saying is the only actual proof of what they thought is from this Nag Hammadi library. That's kind of the super high level cliff notes outside of the writings against all of the Gnostic stuff. Is that
That's my understanding.
Brian? Is that largely true? I mean, I don't care to get into like super nits, but like in broad strokes, is that accurate?
well, I wouldn't say suppressed. I would just say that, I mean, it depends on what you mean by suppressed.
They burned the
Um,
books because they were heretical and didn't want them in circulation.
They called them
um,
dangerous, and they said you will not read this. Like, what do you mean not
well,
suppressed?
uh,
I think you're pushing back because the word suppressed has a an impression of impropriety or strong arming. And
Yeah, it
well,
should.
I think that is generally what, what people mean when they say that. But I
but
mean,
clinically
something.
speaking, that's still what happened, right?
Well, no. It's more like, I mean, Gnosticism and Christianity competed in the marketplace of ideas. Um, Christians, I would say, won. They made the case against Gnosticism, and they were persuasive. There were fewer Gnostics than Christians. I don't think that we were lacking in Gnostic materials because Christians actively went out and, I mean, Christians didn't have any institutional power until the fourth century. So all that time leading up to that, when you're reading about Irenaeus and Tertullian condemning Gnosticism, they weren't like forming mobs and going and burning down Gnostic churches and burning Gnostic
No,
scriptures.
no, they waited to the fourth century for that.
But yeah, some of that happened in the fourth century, but
Some of it.
that was happening to Christians as well for all of that time. Probably, I mean, under the Diocletian persecution, they were burning down churches and taking all the scriptures they could find and burning them. Yet we still have Christian scriptures in wild abundance. Um, the fact is, for writings to be preserved, somebody has to care enough to copy them and preserve
Well,
them.
somebody has to care that survived, right?
Sure, but but Christians weren't going around like slaughtering Gnostics. Um,
I don't know that. I mean, I don't know that we could say that. There would be
we,
no evidence of it because nobody would ever chronicle that.
um, if I think if Christians who were a persecuted minority themselves up until the fourth century were going around committing violence against other citizens of the Roman Empire, I think we would have heard about that. For
No,
all,
but I don't know why you're focusing on before the fourth century. Why couldn't it have all happened in the fourth century? I mean, once Christianity took root and the Roman Catholic Church became the power of Rome, they could have done any of this and it would not exist because
Especially
they would have
when
cleansed the
you
records, right? Like
when
so
when they opened
it's
the coffers and built churches, they built the big basilica in Rome and also in Alexandria. And if you were of heretical or not orthodoxy thinking, you didn't get money to build your church. So why would people come see you and not something? Not to mention when you have the backing of the state, especially a state like Rome, you you kind of shut up whenever you're not doing state back
well,
things.
except the full weight of the full power of the state was leveraged against what we would call Orthodox Christians up until the fourth century. Yet, and there was a systematic effort to wipe them out, to wipe out Christianity as a whole, burning down churches, imprisoning leaders, burning scriptures wherever they could find them.
Brian,
Um,
we agree on this.
yeah,
yeah.
I don't understand the point you're trying to make.
So,
Like
but
we
the
get it, but
so
but Christianity survived and
right.
Gnosticism didn't.
You're you guys seem to be arguing that Gnosticism didn't survive because the state persecuted
That's
them
not what
out
I
of
said.
existence.
That's not even
Okay.
close to what I said.
Okay. Well, then,
I said from a literary point of view.
Okay.
So my
What do you
point was
mean by
simply
that?
the documents.
Okay.
I don't care about the people of Gnosticism or Gnosticism
Well, but
as a religion.
the two
I
are
was just trying to.
inseparable, is my point.
Okay, that's not the point I'm making. If you think they're connected, that's a different issue. I simply wanted to clarify we have zero Gnostic writings historically until the Nag Hammadi because they all ceased to exist somewhere between the first and the third century.
Sure, but my point is contrary to whether you guys are saying this or not, it is often argued that this is because of Christians were persecuting them out of existence. Um,
I said suppressed. I didn't say persecuted, but something happened to the documents. They didn't just evaporate.
yeah, they actually they do just evaporate. That's what happens when
When they're lit
when
on fire, that is what happens.
well, my
So
point
you're
all
telling me in the
along,
third century there were no Gnostic writings that were lit on fire by orthodoxy?
I'm not saying
That's your
that.
that's well then
Well, not in
what's
the
the
third
argument
century.
here?
My argument is that Gnosticism, the information on Gnosticism is not sparse because of persecution. It's sparse because it lost in the marketplace of
It
ideas.
lost in the marketplace of ideas
It could have
in the
been because
fourth
all the
century.
people that wanted to buy it were killed. That also will cause a marketplace to become barren. It's supply and demand. You have to have demand, and if you kill all the demanders, there's nothing to supply.
Yet the same thing was happening to Christians,
And
and
there was just
Christianity
more of them, or they
survived.
were better fighters. Like
It's not because they
Or
were better
I,
fighters,
I
or
but
or they both were around in the third century until one won out and then the rest were burned.
you know
right, like
what? We're going back and forth, and we're at an impasse. I'm happy to rest my case and let the jury decide.
okay.
I disagree
I,
with you guys, but we can move on.
all I was trying to clarify was that the Nag Hammadi is the only written evidence we have of what the original scripts were, and
Sure.
that was all I was trying to get to. I wasn't trying to prove a deeper point.
Well, and I'm addressing your point along with Dre's, but anyway, we can move on from that.
Okay.
I'm confident I've made my case well enough that that my ideas will win in the marketplace of ideas. And so
Be careful, he's going to kill you people if you disagree with him. That's what he just said.
uh
Oh,
Or you'll
or,
evaporate, one of the two.
oi,
Not really sure.
oi,
so
oi.
anyway,
Where were
why
we?
but I is it you're probably going to get to this, and if so, ignore my question, but just why why are we talking about Gnosticism? Why is this important to us right now?
Because I think that it's come up probably about 4 or 5 times during our podcasts, and then I
Oh,
think
it's
that
definitely come up more times
and
than that.
then as we say it, we just that's Gnostic, that's heresy, get out of here with that, right? So just say that's the case is not, I don't think that's accurate. And I think that even if it is accurate, people should know what it is that we're talking about. So just
Sure,
because everybody who is listening, we can't assume that they're all Christians and understand what orthodoxy is. But so somebody who may be listening to this be like, yeah, but I read this book by Bart Ehrman talk about the lost gospels. And there's also, to go along with the persecution burning thing, just because somebody was persecuted doesn't make them right. So you hear a lot of times that people will say like, "Oh, these are the lost gospels of Jesus, and because they were early and because people suppressed them, they must have been afraid of something, so they suppressed the actual truth." That's not necessarily true. It might be a righteous persecution, right? And it might have been a righteous
uh,
burning, like, no bullshit, because we're not talking about the U.S. Constitution and the
Right.
right to free speech, right? It's not the same thing. We're talking about
uh,
third and fourth century people who
Well, yeah,
believe that,
there was no such thing as a secular government, right?
which is
I have to disagree with the phrase righteous persecution in this context, but I don't
no,
want to derail you.
I think
But
that's an okay pushback. I used it for effect, obviously, but
yeah,
Valentine is an interesting case when it comes to Gnostic thought leaders, because Irenaeus in his 5 volume work against heresies, which is just
That's a
so much,
lot.
that's
He had a
so much,
lot to
he
say.
has a lot to say about heresies.
Imagine
He
how angry that dude was all the time.
he actually just kind of hated Marcion. and really hated Valentinus because he claimed that Valentinus was like a wolf in sheep's clothing, which means he infiltrated Orthodoxy churches. He sat among the people. He knew exactly what you believed, and then spread his lies. And Irenaeus was super clear about that. Um,
I I would add that I would characterize, like, if you read John's gospel, it's and a lot of the church fathers, they are they're explaining the gospel in terms that were understandable within Greek philosophy. So like they're kind of appealing to
sure.
a Greek audience. I would characterize Gnosticism as kind of the precise opposite. It's it's a it's a presentation of Greek philosophy with its characteristic substance dualism packaged in Christian terms, but was not in fact Christianity. So I like, but it got a lot of traction because a lot of Christian thinkers like Origen, who would, if they had had the institutional heft to do so, he probably would have been condemned as a heretic, and rightly so. But
You're on mute.
Who are we
I,
talking about again?
Origen,
Or okay, I lost the beat of who you were talking about. I was listening
yeah.
to what you said. I forgot who you said. Okay.
But yeah, like I think like there were, so there's a lot of overlap and resemblance and synonymous use of terms, but the two are actually opposites in difference. And, but I think Gnosticism as a distinct sect was basically died out, largely because its ideas infiltrated Christianity so well. Um, Largely
That
because,
because it's still here is what you're saying. The
yeah,
disembodied spirit going to heaven. Like, so basically Christianity
exactly.
is Gnostic. So, and it's interesting that we use the word Gnostic. I mean, that term wasn't assigned to those people until like until the 1800s, so the 19th century. If you would have asked, Valentinus or his followers, they would have said we're Christian, and we do Christian our way better than they do because we're an esoteric version. We take Jesus seriously when he says that, I teach you something different in secret while I tell these nugs parables.
These
Um
nugs.
these these people, they just get parables because they won't get it anyway.
What do you mean these people?
These people, these damn the Jews. So, um Gnosticism has there's a few pillars. Duality is one of them. To emphasize the stark.
Was that duality consistent with all of these people that we're calling Gnostic?
Um,
No. So they had different levels of it. Like some of them were docetic, right? So we talked about Jesus in the spirit and Jesus. Like a lot of, like, if you read is it
well, I would say Docetism is a outgrowth of that
y-
dualism, though.
sh-
What does that word mean?
yes, but it's but it's
D
but it's extreme. So docetism means that Jesus is never human. So there's a lot of Gnostic texts where Jesus is laughing at while he's being crucified because he was never injured, right? Like he's above the cross. You stupid humans. Which is also interesting
That's
that
how I would have done it if I was Jesus.
right, but you're not Jesus, right?
Because I'm
Right.
not good, and that's
Right.
yeah.
Is that Jesus never laughs in the Gospels.
He didn't seem like a very happy dude,
He sent zingers, like he had zingers where he
but it
just
was
like
always dry.
he like
Like
blew people up.
well,
Like I would have laughed. Like if Jesus was talking, I'd be like, what?
it's never explicitly stated that Jesus laughed.
But it
Um,
right, that's my point though.
but there was
It
a whole
was,
but you
bunch of
could,
dudes that
but
wrote a whole bunch of stuff, and never
but
once was
but
laughter
but
written.
but it was explicitly stated that he wept, and he
yeah,
So he
did
had
burst
emotion,
out.
is the
He
well,
did
point.
burst
Yeah,
out in anger.
yeah.
So, but to
That
say
there
fig
that
was
tree,
there
never laughed.
wasn't
that fig tree caught
actually,
all the smoke.
And when he went when he cleansed the temple, there was some smoke there.
there's actually not a lot of explicit mention of his emotions at any given moment. There's moments
Jesus
where
wept. That's pretty explicit, man.
I said there's not a lot.
No, true,
Yeah.
but there's
But
zero of him laughing.
that verse Jesus wept it stands out for being exceptional
Right.
because
Because there's nothing
expresses
you could
emotion.
imply on it. It was literally
there's
two
Right.
words
there's
or
And
three
so
words, right? It was
there's
and.
explanation. So
Yeah.
scholars say there's like the explanation. The reason why they never says because if it doesn't add to the story, why put it?
Right.
Right. So
it wasn't there wasn't a lot of I mean that was just kind of the style of the time. You didn't they didn't add a lot of sort of detail and color like
Well,
that we
I
do
mean,
today.
Moses was really clear that Moses,
and
you
Yeah.
know,
but he does laugh in the Saint John of the Cross, and he laughs in the Gospel of Judas, but it's never a hearty har har laugh. It's more of a you're a dumbass laugh, and it's like, what, really? Yes, this is what you guys think. You
And
think that your God cares about eating the Eucharist? That's the Gospel of Judas. Like, let me bring Judas over here and tell him the real secret, because you stupid disciples, they still don't even know me. So it's interesting that in this Gnostic dual text, Jesus laughs, but it's never because something funny was said. It's always mocking
yeah.
the
I think
believers.
to use an emotion from all of the parables and the conversations that I can think of off the top of my head, the best word would be exasperated. Jesus always seemed aggravated he's like, how many times I got to tell you all this story? Like,
Especially
yeah,
you fools who've been walking
like
around every time
he
I preach
he,
it, and
he
you're
seemed
still asking me.
genuinely aggravated
yeah,
a lot.
we get that from the quotations attributed to him.
Yeah.
Right.
Like we read that and from what he's saying, oh, he must be kind of pissed off right here.
Hmm.
But it never says Jesus super
Said,
pissed
yeah.
But what if,
said,
Well,
but what if,
but the
but what
words
if
he's
he said
quoted
it
as
super?
saying,
What if he said it super lovingly, like, "Hey, I told you," and I don't know
"Hey,
why you keep like.
woe
what was
woe to
the
you,
quote? What was the
woe to
quote?
you, Pharisees, you
You,
snakes, you brood of vipers, you
yeah.
whitewashed tombs,
You
That's
should
how
be
Michael Jackson
grown.
talked.
You
Have you
you
should
ever
be
seen
grown,
rascals."
guys, but
if
you
you
still drink milk like babies
if
because you've yet to figure it out, you
I think
silly gooses.
I think I
Get
like this
behind me,
version.
Satan. You are a
I was
stumbling block to me.
I was watching
You
the Michael
silly
Jackson
goose.
documentary, This Is It, and Michael's he's super mad at like the director.
Allegedly.
Like super mad. The director's like, he's like, when who told you to start the guitar here? You're supposed to let me just let that simmer. And then he's like,
Let it
I, s-
simmer.
I,
Let it simmer.
I say this with love, Love. And when the dancers are messing, he's like, okay, bring it in. Listen, I love you, but we have to be better. Okay,
But
we
I will
just
murder every single last one of you.
he's like, anyway, because this show is gonna be perfect. I'm Michael Jackson. Okay, okay, get back to your places.
That'd probably be a little terrifying.
And don't mess it up. I love you, by the way. I love you. And that's, as I was watching it in 2008 in the movie theater in England, I was thinking about Jesus. Like, this is a true story. I was like, I wonder if Jesus talked to his disciples. Okay, listen. No.
Jesus was not trying to save his singing voice, though.
So
That's a fair point.
are we sure?
I guess I can't prove that.
Because I don't know
But
if
I,
you've ever
but I, don't-
spoken outdoors
but I don't want to
in
think of him
something
that way.
other than an amphitheater, right? So he's on a plane on the top of a mountain, and
But that was actually a natural amphitheater.
But if
was it?
anything,
Yeah.
I
You
think
still have to project, right? You
I
can't
think
just
so. I think you're both a little right. I have a hard time believing Jesus was trying to protect his falsetto.
there you go.
Come
But
on.
his
But
but his singing was
he certainly might have been trying to protect his vocal cords. He could have been more of like a, David Draymond of Disturbed. Like, I got to drink a lot of water and keep the vocal cords
it's
hydrated.
interesting because there is another scene in This Is It where the female, I forget who's singing with him in I Just Can't Stop Loving You. She sings her part, but she tears it up. She like boom, and he's like, whoa, like you're making me want to keep up with you, and I can't do that because I'm not ready. Like, why are
Mm,
you doing that? Stop singing well. Stop it. I love you, by the way. So I think
LOVELF.
there is a little bit of both. Like he
I miss
got
Michael Jackson.
I love the dude. So I'm making
He
fun
he
of him,
kind
but
of
he's my guy.
he kind of turned into a Batman villain but that's okay.
I
I would
I
root for him against
we
Batman.
we may have to just have a segment on a later show of me telling you why. Don't you ever say that again, or we're gonna fight. So
About Michael Jackson being a
Michael Jackson
Batman
turning into
villain.
a Batman villain. He was not a Batman villain. You watch your mouth. I mean, we're talking about
I
Batman villains.
I
Gnosticism
mean,
is a Batman villain. So it like
look,
it's
I'll argue with you about a lot of stuff, but I understand when you're serious, and I'll back off.
no, no, Michael, not Mike, not my Michael.
I know. I'm sorry. He's
Uh,
like,
so duality.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So before we end this, I do want to I want to say a few things.
we're
Just
not ending. Like, what are you talking about?
I know, but I just want to put a
Okay,
pin in these things
okay.
just so we can circle back to them.
Oh, I thought we
I,
were done.
I think we need to go through why Gnosticism is bad and wrong, and two, when I'm often accusing the early church, I mean, not the early church, I'm often attributing Gnostic ideas, heretical Gnostic ideas, to the modern church, and I like to kind of unpackage that a bit
Of course,
before
we're
we
gonna let
wrap
you.
this
That
up.
I think that's another point of why we're doing this, because
Yeah,
you
We
do
want to get you
assign.
on record.
We do. So
happy to.
you didn't have to add that. I had you, Brian. You didn't trust me. You have no faith in Andre, and that
It's
hurts.
not that's not true. I
You didn't
just
have
thought
faith.
I did,
No, because you proved you didn't have faith by just announcing these are the things I want because I know that Andre won't get to it.
Because you're
That's
only
what I
of the
heard.
flesh. That's why.
I mean, it's cool. I mean, I
well,
get it.
I bought you a birthday present though.
You did. You
An
did.
awesome birthday present that you'll
It-
cherish forever.
it's a hilarious birthday present. I don't know how. I think it's awesome in the way that it's hilarious, but
I think my issue with this whole concept of Gnosticism as an umbrella, I think is where I have problems,
that's one of my problems too.
right? Because, specifically when I asked you guys, like, what's the hard and fast definition of Gnosticism? And you both said, well, right. And then like lots of words
Right.
came after that, right?
Right.
So I struggle then.
But we did nail down some pretty
I
salient
mean, a
commonalities.
few key things, but then I said, "Is this
I mean,
consistent with all Gnostics?" And I got,
there's pillars
well,
because it's not
right,
because it's
right.
not.
So,
Well, it's
the
not
reason. So
And that's
let me
why I'm
finish my
going through.
let me
Sure,
finish
go
my
ahead.
point. So that makes it troublesome then, whenever I hear a sweeping statement of, "Well, that's Gnostic," and I'm like, "Well, is it because it adheres to one of the pillars or all of the pillars, or because it's like?" I can accept that there are some things that are just dyed in the wool Gnostic, right? Like that is precisely what Valentino, whatever the hell his name was, wrote about, right?
Valentinus.
Cool. Or this is specifically why Irenaeus wrote 5 volumes, right, about that very thing. Cool. But I I I feel as if sometimes Gnosticism gets thrown out as a way to say that's just not what I'm using air quotes for those that can't see me, think Christianity is. So if you think it's different, that's Gnostic and you're a heretic. So
Sure.
I'm just expressing my general
Or
um
or a pastor will tell you don't even open the pages of anything in a
right,
Nag Hammadi library because that's dangerous,
right.
right? When if your faith is strong, then why would a book written that says
Well,
silly
Well,
stuff?
and I think that
uh,
those ideas carried over to the, like, say, the Book of Enoch and Jubilees, right? Like that same mentality of don't go read that because it's heretical and it'll ruin you and it'll rip your Christianity from you and it'll send you down a path. And now I've heard many modern Christian scholars, specifically Wes Huff, say he thinks reading the Book of Enoch is reasonable and you should read it because it's so heavily referenced by the Bible itself, and it was well known by biblical people, right? So they talked about things that were central to that. And I'm not saying that's the same with the books of the Nag Hammadi, right? I'm saying that Gnostic bad, don't read these books, bled onto other books, which I think is problematic broadly. So that's all I was trying to say.
huh.
I mean,
I
you,
think
you
we
asked what a definition
Yeah.
of, and I think that there's three pillars.
Okay.
The first pillar is duality,
Okay.
and basically is saying that
substance
the
duality.
the material world is seen as a prison, and human souls are trapped within it, yearning to return to the divine
Right.
source. The second pillar is gnosis. So there's hidden knowledge.
Mhm.
So a Gnostic thought
Salvation by way of hidden
salvation is
knowledge.
achieved not through faith or works, but through esoteric spiritual knowledge of one's divine origins and the true nature of reality. Because if you have the correct knowledge, then you're gonna
That
understand the true
that
nature of
sounds
reality.
crazy. That sounds oddly Freemason.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Western occult tradition, which Freemason, I think I would I don't know this because I'm not a Freemason, but I'm
And if you were, you couldn't tell us about what you're about to say.
um if I that's probably true, but I would never be a Freemason because I think the idea of a secret society is repugnant.
I think I'm
But
going undercover. I'm going undercover, dude. You got to cut that part out because
they
now they know.
Okay.
they've probably thought of that and they've probably set up guards. But I think Freemason, the 39 degrees of, is it 39 degrees?
33.
30, that's right, 33. I think that is an expansion on the 38th years of John Dee. And Western occultism is a lot of it is sort of an underground version of Christianity. John Dee thought of himself as a Christian the way that Gnostics thought of themselves as Christians, but it retained a lot of heavily Gnostic ideas.
Mm.
But then again, so does medieval Christianity, so does modern Christianity. Um, but anyway, did you went you had a third pillar to get to?
Yeah,
Well, he said it, I thought.
I didn't. The third pillar is the divine spark. So every human has a divine spark. So it's about an awakening that to understand and remember that you are divine. So it's part of that duality too, because it means that you have a fragment of God. It means that God can be broken up into pieces, and you can have a piece of that. Uh, the spark is trapped in the physical body again. It's kind of like pillar two, but the difference is that you're divine, and the goal of the whole human existence is to awaken the divine smart spark, reconnect with the divine realm, and escape the cycles of reincarnation in this material existence. I think what's interesting about homeboy Marcion is was it in 140 he actually proposed the first canon. So
It was
uh,
a whack cannon.
it was his canon was the Gospel of Luke, a redacted version of the Gospel of Luke, and Paul's letters minus the pastorals and Hebrews. We know that Paul didn't write Hebrews, but it was a thing. So
Like a
he
like a super gerrymandered version of the Bible,
so
cutting out the Old Testament entirely
Oh,
in
no. Oh,
order
that
to,
wasn't just the New Testament. That was the whole Bible.
the correct.
yeah.
This is the canon. Ready for the canon? Luke and like 10 letters from Paul.
Yeah,
That's
he saw the God
canon.
of the Old Testament as being the evil
And
Oh,
he
I
demiurge.
and he
see.
took his cues from Paul. And that's part of the reason why the church fathers really attacked him, because he had people out there thinking
Oh,
that
because
Paul
he
was
was
that
cool with
Well,
Paul was
Paul's
Gnostic.
letters, so then Paul got clumped
But
into him
but
by.
his ideas were so basically he listened to Paul. He's like, "Oh, oh, you think so? Paul, you didn't go far enough. You said the old covenant's a curse? Come on, tell me what you really think. That
I see.
that they demons. You
so
you claim Paul claims that he didn't meet Jesus in the flesh, and there's men that Jesus of the flesh. I know Jesus of the spirit. I know the
Mm,
Christ.
mm.
So he's like,
I
Paul,
can see
just
how all that
just
kind of fits into
just say
their,
what you
yeah.
mean. Is that those clowns were heavily influenced by the demiurge. The 12 disciples,
so
they knew Jesus of the flesh because Jesus of the flesh
And because they all
isn't a
came
good.
to Christianity as Jews.
now, are you saying that he rightly understood Paul, or are you saying
Are
he
you saying
tried
he
to rewrite,
co-opted?
Well, I
or are
just
you
said
saying
I
he
just
tried?
said the reason why the church fathers
Let me
attacked him over this.
let me finish my question. I was
Oh, you
laying out
had more to that question
options.
because the beginning
Yeah.
it was absurd. Go ahead.
just for clarity's sake, are you saying he rightly understood Paul, or are you saying he rewrote Paul to?
Well, maybe you shouldn't have interrupted me and let me finish what I'm saying. You would have got the answer to that. Go ahead, sigh. Sigh again. I'll give you time.
Did you
Sigh,
get
Brian.
did you get that off your chest yet? Do you?
I'm just saying, like, this is what Marcion's canon was, and this is the
Okay.
way he saw Paul. You already know that I don't agree with Marcion, Brian. You already know that I don't agree with Gnostics. You have heard in the past that
Okay.
Paul's a pain in my thing, but
Yeah.
Paul also drops bars. And so
So, so yeah, it's a valid question. Just
well, I
because
wasn't
you,
done.
well, I mean, okay, I'll let you finish. I mean,
Well, now I can't because you just, I mean, now,
thought we
now
were
the question's
having.
out there. No, I don't think that he interpreted Paul correctly, and I think the church fathers were right for attacking him. I do, however, think that maybe Paul got bigger because the church fathers are like, nah, you can't take Paul. Paul's our guy, and I'm championing Paul. Paul's Paul's the one.
Hmm.
Paul's the
What,
one.
what do you mean by that?
I
He got
mean
bigger.
that I mean that there are some.
You're saying the amount of footprint that Paul has in the New Testament might have been smaller had they not have to like steal him and prop him up to make sure that everything that he
Could
wrote
be
was
Well,
was good Christian versus
I
Gnostic
don't
Christian.
understand what that means. Like,
okay.
how would they like? What do you mean by his footprint would be bigger? Like they
Well,
would,
Paul wrote like 2/3 of the New Testament.
right?
His footprint,
So would they have thrown out books of Paul
possibly.
for
I don't
that?
know. I don't know
Like
I
because
mean,
they didn't make the canon when the heresy books were written, right? So I don't know what was in circulation at the time, and I don't know what the Gnostics were thinking, or the people that followed Marcion, what they believed about Paul, and kind of some of Paul's thoughts kind of get mystical, right? He's like the
well, I
Mysterion
mean,
that is
the
known from
East
the beginning of the ages.
he talks about this great
He does talk
mystery.
about that stuff.
The Eastern Orthodox love them some mystery, right? So like
So there's esotericness in Paul.
what do you mean by that?
What do you mean? There's secret knowledge that Paul talks about, and he's like, here is the secret that the trumpet will sound, and
Well,
we will be brought up into the sky, and we will like all
listen,
that's.
I
Nobody
tell
says that
you,
except Paul. Nobody.
listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed, and then um
We'll have a sparkly body and go to heaven.
well, we will be changed in the twinkling of an eye. He doesn't say sparkly body. It's
We get a new body. We just shed our old body and get this new
like we're
body. And I
vampires from
added this
Twilight.
sparkly because we'll get this godly body.
You make it sound like we're vampires in Twilight. It's
I didn't
gross.
make
I
sound. Paul
reject
makes it
it.
sound like that. I'm
No,
I'm
that's
not saying
you.
this.
That's you.
People are
That's
saying
heresy.
I'm not the guy
That's
saying
worse
it.
than Gnosticism.
All the other people are saying it.
Take it back. Renounce your heresy.
I just
Renounce your
ordered,
heresy.
by the way,
Renounce Twilight.
I just ordered Irenaeus as we've been sitting here talking.
So in kind of recap with Marcionism, he has two distinct gods and worlds, the rejection of the Old Testament, Jesus as the son of a higher God, not this dang demiurge, uh, the docetic Christology, salvation through faith alone, using gnosis, the rejection of the law and the prophets, and the opposition to the 12 apostles of Christ. And that was kind
That's
of
actually a lot.
that is a lot. That's a big. So when people usually say Gnostic, I think they're talking about Marcion's version of Gnosticism
Well,
or the
scholars don't
Sethians.
generally consider Marcion to be a Gnostic, although he has a lot in common with Gnosticism. Like
That's interesting.
he didn't believe in that substance dualism. He believed in a moral dualism. He believed that there was, I mean, he had in common with the Gnostics that the God of the Old Testament was evil, but not because he created material reality, but because of the law of Moses, because of all the all the wrath and plagues and that kind of stuff. But it's I think he has enough in common with Gnosticism that it's not inappropriate to talk about him in this conversation, but it's not, he's not strictly speaking a Gnostic, and he's not what
Hmm.
people think about when he's not the person that Irenaeus was writing against, and when he called out Gnostics.
Tertullian
Um,
did. Tertullian called
right.
him out specifically. In fact, I have a quote.
You know you've done some work if you have a church father calling you out by name.
Tertullian,
Right.
he
Yeah,
himself
that's my ambition, actually. I
says
would like to be
Marcion.
I would like to be well enough known that like a major evangelical figure, or even like the Pope, says like, hey, that Brian Irvin, he's bad. Don't listen to him.
The quote from Tertullian is, he himself, says Marcion, claims to be an apostle, and that not from men nor through any man, but through Jesus Christ, which is very Paul. Clearly, any man can make a claim for himself, but his claim is confirmed by another person's attestation. One person writes a document, another person signs it, a third attests it and in a signature, and the fourth enters it into the records. No man is for himself both claimant and witness. So that's Tertullian in 203 CE in his book called Against Marcion. So he not only
He wrote a book.
against Marcion. So I mean, you say the church fathers didn't, but Tertullian's like, no, 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 F
Wait,
Marcion. I think
I say the church fathers didn't what?
you said that Irenaeus
Right,
didn't
right, right,
really
right, right, right.
attack Marcion because
Yeah, but
he
no,
attacked Valentinus. That's why
no, I'm
he was very
saying like
Valentinus.
in their attack on Gnosticism, they weren't attacking
They didn't
Marcion. Like
attack
Marcion
Gnosticism.
was his own
They
guy.
attacked heresies,
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. But Gnosticism was a specific
but
kind of
they didn't
heresy.
call it that. Like no one
Irenaeus did call it Gnosticism.
he did
Yeah,
when
in
his
his
5 volume book, he said it.
yeah, he
I don't know.
specifically called it.
I might have to put a Brian Bet on Matt type. Like we got to find that.
All right, what do you want
Well,
to
when
bet?
Find the actual quote.
he
Well,
actually
I
calls
have the
them
book coming,
Gnostics. Well,
so
yeah. Well,
I'll read it when I get it, and
I don't.
I'll weigh in on this. We'll
Well, I
put it
don't
on the
think the
board.
term Gnostic was used for those people
What do you want to
until
bet?
I don't know. A
Well,
real He-Man doll?
they I thought
That's
about
a good bet.
I thought about getting you one of those too, like giving you two presents,
But
but
then that'd
it
be
like
duality. We can't have that.
it just
It would be a Gnostic gift.
it felt like when I ordered that on impulse, and then I got it, and I'm like, I don't know if this joke's gonna land or not. And I thought about, but like it seemed like I was like just leaning into it too much if I ordered
I think you
another
were
action
leaning
figure.
into it hard, and you're kind of a wuss by thinking that it wouldn't land.
I do. I regret that now. I
I
wish
think if
I'd
you would have consulted with our third partner here,
He did.
I
he
He
uh,
did
and
actually,
you
and that's
told me it
why
would have
he brought
landed.
it. Oh yeah, yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
oh yeah, that'll
He
land.
sent me a picture, and he's like, "Dude, I got this for Dre for his birthday." I'm like, "Dude, that's awesome." He's like, "You think the joke's gonna land?" He's like, "I'm kind of worried it won't." I was like, "Nah, you're good. Full send."
I should have had you open it like
In front of
during the
everybody,
party in front of
right?
everybody. But
Because then I
yeah,
would have
I
had to be
regret
gracious
that.
regardless because of image. I would have been like Andre Agassi in the Canon commercials. Image is everything. Remember those?
Yeah,
Like, so,
I regret that. Life lesson
you
learned.
know what can you do?
But yeah, Irenaeus did call them Gnostics, and they did, in their own writings, refer to themselves as those who know, or those who have knowledge.
Hell yeah, because they did.
Um, yeah, and so, but yeah, I'll do my little TED talk whenever you guys are ready.
Sure. I think interesting. We brought up the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and at the time there was the church was young and early, so women weren't allowed to do things based upon Paul's teachings and
Oh,
the
remember
was it the epistle to
remember the
Timothy.
angels?
Okay, remember
I
them?
don't I don't think well, women weren't allowed to do things. There were
I
women
mean,
who
we had
were
this whole episode. Go back and
yeah.
reference that. We explained
Yeah, but
what
we need to
Paul's,
be more women weren't allowed to be like pastors and bishops, but they were allowed to be deacons. They were allowed to serve in the church,
but
and
they were also told to be silent, and there was a lot of that going on.
that is a valid observation. I agree with
So,
that.
and part of the part of apologetics is that the Christians actually claimed that Mary was the first to see the risen Jesus. And if they were trying to convince people of something, they wouldn't use her to tell their story because no one's gonna, pay attention to that because women weren't even allowed to be a witness in a court of law, correct? At that time
Well,
in that area.
not exactly. A woman's you needed two testimonies of you needed two women to testify to equal that of the testimony of a man. Um,
So in the Gospel of Mary,
So back then they were only worth 50 cents, not
yeah,
70
basically,
cents.
yeah.
it's
I mean, at least there
coming
weren't black
up.
people
They're
in
coming
America.
up.
So, uh, she, it's mentioned by Philip, hey, the Savior was super close to you. Tell us what he said. And so she tells the disciples what Jesus said to her, and Peter gets super pissed. He's like, why would he tell you that shit and not us? Like, okay. So then his brother Andrew pops up and says, hey, you've always been a hothead. And she's like, what do you think I'm lying? Do you think I'm not capable of telling you what the Savior said? These are the things I'm saying to you, and it's true. And a lot of people that read that gospel see it as at the time, it's it's in opposition of the to succession, because they make Peter out to kind of be the bad guy here. And also, hey, women can also, and also let me back up. In the beginning of that gospel, they're all super down and melancholy. And they're like, I don't know if we can go preach this word because our Savior just got crucified. And if he got crucified, what's going to happen to us? But
The same thing.
It's Mary that stands up and says, hey, you know what you're supposed to do. The Savior told us what we're supposed to do. Let's go do it. And she gives them the pep talk at the halftime, right? So she's the one that's like, get it in,
Hmm.
get it in. So basically it's just a
She's like Adrian in the middle of a Rocky movie.
I'm afraid, all right? You want to break me down? You want to
Afraid
make me
of
say it? I'm
what? Afraid of
afraid.
what?
So she is
What's the
Adrian.
truth, damn it?
Adrian always tells the truth. You can't win. Uh so it's kind of a champion story of a woman who is the hero. It pushes back against the establishment, and it pushes back against apostolic succession. That's kind of the point of the Gospel of Mary.
I gotta point
Those
out,
don't sound like terrible things.
uh,
I
pushing
mean,
back
you can read it for
against
yourself. I mean,
Apostolic succession? I mean,
um
that sounds dope.
pushing back against apostolic succession.
Hmm.
Why is that dope?
I'm not sure
we
why
just had a
you're
whole episode on
baiting me on that
Catholicism.
question because that takes Catholicism off the table.
Well, I don't think they didn't have apostolic succession in that sense at the time, but
Are you sure?
anyway, I was just going to point out how cool it is that your son had a birthday party that was Rocky 4 themed. And
So, was it
since
my
we just
son? So this had to be 20 years ago
was
ish.
it 20 years ago?
Yeah, because he's 27 now, and I think that was his first grade or second grade birthday party.
Oh, I thought he was older than that, but it's
No,
it's
so
kind of
he's like
cooler. It's
he's a
it's
little
almost
boy,
cooler.
and the three C's, Cooper, Connor, and some other dude, and they were a pain in the ass in the class. Like everyone hates the three C's because they were loud and obnoxious. And we were having a birthday party, and we rented out an entire theater. And we're like, son, you're having a movie theater party. What is it that you want to watch? He's like, I want to watch Rocky. And I'm like that Chris Pine meme. Of course you do. And they didn't have Rocky, which would have been boring for little kids anyway. I'm like, well, let's do Rocky 4. Watch Rocky 4. And when you go to a movie theater on base, you stand up for the national anthem. And these kids were front row, and they had like punching bags and punching gloves and like balloons, and they were saluting. And then at the end, when Rocky defeats communism and tears the wall down in Berlin,
Yeah,
That
I
was a
remember
great moment.
that. Remember that
they're
exact moment.
playing they're playing the music. These kids stand up and snap off a hardcore salute. There's like boom, and it's a proud dad moment. And he got to keep the DVD from his birthday, and we did popcorn and whatnot. So
That's awesome.
they thought that's I, I think he thinks that's his top birthday, but Aubrey thinks that us renting out an entire club in England, like that was for both of them. It's a bunch of high school kids in England, which is basically junior high.
That sounds
Uh,
like that was Aubrey's top.
right. So but they had it together, so we rented out a well, we were landlords of a pub, and the pub chain also had a club in it. So we got to have the club for the whole day, and DJ and whatnot. So they got to like ooh, ooh, in England for like their 12th and 11th birthday. So
Nice.
that's kind of dope.
All right. So
And the
Gnosticism,
and the
sorry.
in the third probably gospel is the gospel of Judas. Now Judas is a weird thing because you can't tell if Judas is a good guy or a bad guy in the reading of it. It's like what
Okay, so just for the listeners' benefit, we are all agree that Judas did not write that.
well, this is what's interesting about it in the title. So what's the Greek for the gospel of, Brian? Aka,
Evangelion.
right. Well,
Hold on.
Judas doesn't say that. So it says Evangelicon Aka Mark, right? This one leaves that part out. So it's not the gospel, like the gospel of Jesus according to Judas. It's more like a gospel, the good news for Judas. That's the name of this book. So it's translated a little funky, which which makes it interesting, right? This is a sect of
Like it's
people,
the good news about Judas.
or the good news for Judas, because Judas needs some good news because he's pretty screwed. And
Having your bowels fall out after you hang yourself is
yeah, I mean,
a
yeah,
bad time.
yeah, and that's what you use your 30 pieces of silver on, buying a field so you can get your bowels cut out of you. What are you doing, Judas?
I think it was more they burst out. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't pretty sure he deserved it. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm
I can't
not.
judge. I can't judge. It
Um,
wasn't me that judged him. It wasn't me.
well, it's better. It would have been better for him not to be born.
Okay,
That's what I can. That's what I'm gonna go with.
this text is like super like textbook Sethian, where
What
they're
do you mean by Sethian?
Yeah, you said that a couple of times, and I
so
meant to ask
Sethian
you.
is a sect of Gnosticism, kind of the original, where Seth is like the main character, the third child of Adam and Eve, right? So he's the line of Seth is the one that's gonna where the savior is gonna come from.
And
Which
And
is which is
just to be
biblical.
clear, he's the third because the first two were these guys called Cain and Abel,
correct,
Yeah.
and one's dead and one was sent to a different place
right.
where he either did or didn't find people that weren't his family. And
So there's a lot of Gnostic texts like that tells it's like a retelling of Genesis, and there's a story of Adam on his deathbed and his son Seth getting the story of how Eden was made and how the demiurge came about. And in this Gospel of Judas, it actually is a retelling of that story, because once there's some buzzwords, bear with me, of things that are super Gnostic. These are
Super Gnostic.
super. These are like if you read this in a
Super.
book, it's Dagon Gnostic. And I know I have it somewhere. Maybe I don't. Well, it's words like Aeon, Demiurge, um, Pel Roma, um, and it has. Gosh, I have it written. It doesn't matter. There's like a long list of
Pleroma.
there's a
Are
list
are
of
you
things.
are you searching for
Sophia,
are you searching
Numa,
for emanations?
emanations. Like these are These are all things.
Yeah.
If you see that in some kind of
Do,
text, you know Gnostics wrote it
do you
because
want to know
that's
what, do you want to explain what emanations are? Or you want me to do it?
yeah. Do
Or
that real quick.
maybe Matt, you want to do it?
I mean, I know what emanations are from an RF point of view. I don't know if that's what we're talking about
Just
here.
wing it.
Kinda.
Just tell us
It's
what emanations
it's
are.
kind of
When things come out of things and they radiate, and it's and there's information or uh like a carryover from what that first thing was that are moving through the ether.
The ether. All right. Yeah, so emanations in the like you're like that's a good start. That's a good like starting point to explain Gnostic emanations. I mentioned before about how the one, the monad, the one true God who is pure spirit, the source of everything. He's so pure that and holy and good that for him to devote his attention to anything other than himself would be unworthy of him. And so instead of so he creates by contemplating himself, and in so doing, he emanates sort of like lesser versions of himself. And that's where you get the like Sophia and
aeons and bythos
aeons
and
and
monad, the logos and
yeah.
barbello. And barbello is the first emanation of the monad, often feminine and central to Sethian texts. And this is where this comes in the Gospel of Judas, because as as Jesus asks, like, "Hey, who do you think I am?" I guess Judas gets the answer right, or he asks, like, whatever. How's it go? It's something about whoever is pure enough to step before me, go ahead and do so. And all of the disciples duck away except Judas. And he's like, "Hey, Judas, come this way." He's like, The reason why I'm pulling you away is because I know that you're of Barbello, which means that he is an emanation spirit from this Seth line. So basically, he's the good guy because he has to turn Jesus in. Because if he does that, then Jesus is able to escape this human, wretched, disgusting body, and he can become his pure spirit again, which makes Judas the good guy of releasing him from this
I mean,
demiurgic
there's
land.
like
certainly there's
like
certainly
Harvey
a
Keitel. Yeah.
I mean, I would say there's probably a whole lot of Christians that believe that same thing,
I've heard it
partly,
said
right?
before. I have heard
Like if
it's
Judas didn't turn
predestined,
Christ
right?
in, then Christ wouldn't have been arrested, and then Christ couldn't have been sacrificed, right? So I'll throw a spoiler out for one of our next upcoming shows, right? The atonement couldn't have happened if this weren't the case, right? And
Right.
whether it's predetermination or predestination in the Calvinism sense, or just in the broad spiritual sense, right? It had to happen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just put out that no, Judas was not a good guy.
But oh, listen,
But we'll
nobody. No,
save that for another episode.
yeah,
He's
nobody.
not the good guy, but he's a necessary guy.
He's a
But
right.
sure, but like that like yeah, that's there's a whole big discussion there.
Hmm.
That it's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing now.
Yeah,
But just for the record, he's
yeah.
bad.
I think
I don't want to.
I think we're on board. I think everybody's on
I'll
board with what you're
Yeah,
saying, Brian.
I'll
I think
elaborate
it's
on that and
yeah.
when we do that episode. But
yeah, so, so so he gets swooped away, and Jesus is like, yeah, you have to go away so they get a 13th, and then there'll be 12, and they'll be just like the 12 tribes of Israel, and they'll be evil over there with the demiurge, and we're gonna leave those stupid disciples behind. And then he takes them on this crazy psychedelic.
Like some Mr. Toad ride.
He takes him on a ride where he's like his cosmic tour guide, where he meets the Adamus and the Sophia, and he meets the Demiurge as they split apart, and Judas gets to see what's crazy is he's like, "Hey, Judas, you're gonna do this thing, but you're gonna have lots of grief." So that's where it's like, okay, so is that a good thing or a bad thing that he's gonna have grief?
this
Is
sounds
it
like
grief?
Muhammad's night journey.
Is he gonna have
I,
grief because because he's turning Jesus in, or is he having grief because he can't be with? I mean, what is?
Muhammad's night journey sounds better than this.
um,
But this is what Muhammad ripped off when he
I think you're right.
revealed his night
Interesting.
journey.
I think you're right. Uh,
Both
because
of their intestines could have fell out. Never mind.
Judas is said to maybe
I'm
have been
probably gonna
written
get a fatwa on
is
me now,
written
but
probably about 150 AD. They think that some of these themes, and there's a tone in the gospel, and there's lots of holes. It's because it got screwed up, because somebody wanted to preserve it, so they sent it to New York and they put it in a safety deposit box. And I don't know if you've been to New York in the summer, but it gets pretty humid. And that's not the same as the arid desert of where that book came from. So when they
Mm.
pulled it out of the deposit box, it like shredded into thousands of pieces. So they've had to like meticulously put this thing back together. So it was purchased in 2000. By 2005 and 2006, it was actually published. So that's kind of one of the significances about the Gospel of Judas itself is how old the text is and how old the tradition is for this writing in this Sethian Gnostic style. But it's the newest thing that we've seen that has to do with any of this. So National Geographic bought it. Um, Elaine Pagels, Karen King, Bart Ehrman, and some other scholars were hired to talk about it and translate it
Hmm.
and kind of publish it. Elaine Pagels tells a story where she thinks that it was bought off the black market, and then she was really quick to say, "I don't think National Geographic knew that it was illegal, but I'm pretty sure it was illegal." So National Geographic's good, but the whole industry is terrible. Um, but there's a theme in there that's against martyrdom. Uh, I forget how it goes, but basically it's Judas. It's kind of a cautionary tale, like you don't need to be a martyr and you don't have to go out there and start killing yourself over this thing. So you had the Gospel of Mary that had like this feminist viewpoint, and then there was this anti you don't need to die for this message on the
yeah,
on the Gospel of Judas.
there's a weird kind of excuse me, a weird kind of dichotomy within Gnosticism predicated on their substance duality, their strict distinction between spirit and matter. Whereas on the one hand, they like certain strains of it are extremely ascetic. Like they're all about fasting and torturing the flesh and just kind of like treating the flesh like crap and in favor of the spirit, in order to kind of like keep their attention on the spirit instead of the flesh. So they starve themselves and deny themselves comforts and pleasures and all this stuff. On the other hand, because of that distinction between spirit and flesh, the thinking is, well, nothing you do in the flesh really matters. So you can eat as much as you want, you can have as much promiscuous sex as you want, you can get whatever STDs you want, you can just go, you can do whatever you want to the flesh, and there's a separation between the flesh and the spirit. Um,
I don't think people really want STDs.
no, I don't,
They want to
I,
do the things that causes them.
right.
Right. No, I
But
know.
their
Yeah.
but their point is like you can pollute the flesh
Sure.
as
I
much
get
as
it.
you want. You can debauch yourself and defile the flesh as much as you want. It doesn't matter because that's just a prison anyway. That's just causing your prison bars to rust more, and it doesn't it's not a bad thing because the flesh is unaffected.
Isn't it, isn't that largely, I mean, Judaism kind of has that same belief system, right? In that this existence is hell and the only purpose is to get through it so that you can die and be with God.
I don't think so.
I feel like I feel like I've read that.
Judaism is somewhat agnostic about the afterlife. Um, they a lot of modern Jews have sort of adopted the standard religious idea about going to heaven as a disembodied spirit. But since the Hebrew scriptures don't actually teach that, they don't really embrace that institutionally. They just kind of leave that question open. Um, So, but yeah, but anyway, the latter version, the asceticism of Gnosticism that kind of made its way into mainstream Christian thinking over the in the early cent in the over the early century, so that by the time of Saint Anthony, who was a mentor to Athanasius, who was probably the main thinker who comes out of the kind of the Nicene era. Like he was the father of monasticism, and you read Athanasius's biography about Athanasius, and he kind of gives these brief little stories about other ascetics who were kind of part of the monastic tradition, and it's totally like crazy stuff. Talks about this one guy who spent like 10 years like living on a pillar, just living there in the elements, and people would like bring him food. He just sat there contemplating God, but he
Yikes.
didn't do anything. He just kind of sat there just being stoic. And there's all kinds of just really like effusive over the top praise for this guy, because he was so like in charge of his flesh that he let like maggots fester on a wound, and he didn't attend to them. He just let them eat him. Um, and this was praise. This was a hagiography of these ascetics, and it's total. Frankly, I think it was kind of sick. But anyway, I don't want to. That's a preview for when I talk about why Gnosticism is bad. So these dudes would just like live in isolation for years, just doing nothing but um, quote unquote mortifying the flesh. Like they weren't helping anybody. They weren't like they're just focusing on this one aspect of on it. It's not in itself illegitimate as a spiritual discipline, but when you make that the whole of spiritual discipline, just denying the flesh for it, as if the whole point of Christianity, of Christian redemption and salvation and transformation, is just to deny the flesh for its own sake. It just kind of misses the point. Um, but um, but yeah, that was just kind of an aside. It's not really my main thing. As far as why Gnosticism is wrong and bad, so it has a pessimistic view of existence, of life, of the body, of matter, of the created order. Um, it's basically like repackaged Hinduism. Um, and you guys have heard me said before on multiple occasions.
There's only two types of religions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, for the benefit of our readers, the Reader's Digest version, I mean, the benefit of our listeners, the Reader's Digest version is it's a binary question. Either the universe is eternal and all life and consciousness within it is contingent upon it, or God is eternal and the universe and all life within it is contingent upon him. Um, the first one is basically pantheism. Um, Within Hinduism, which is the most uh, furthest developed version of this, but all pagan polytheistic religion would kind of fall under this umbrella. In Hinduism, the goal of Hindu spirituality is the escape from samsara. Samsara being the endless cycle of life, death, and reincarnation. You just keep living over and over and over and over and over again. You can live well and accumulate good karma and kind of get promoted in the next life, or you live badly, accumulate bad karma and get demoted in the next life into some lower life form. But the ultimate goal is to just get off the ride and be reabsorbed back into Brahman, into being one with everything. The idea is that since the universe is eternal, it is God. All of us as individual organisms are essentially identical to God. We have just forgotten that we're God, and that's what traps us in the cycle. The goal of enlightenment is to realize is to destroy our individual ego and realize our ontological unity with the one, and in so doing escape the cycle of samsara. It basically treats life on earth, life in material existence, as a curse to be escaped. And that's essentially the same as Gnosticism, where spirits trapped in bodies, the goal is to be freed, to be reabsorbed into the one. In stark contrast, you have the book of Genesis, where God alone is eternal. He creates the world in 6 days. At the end of each day, he says, and it is good, and it is good, and it is good. And on the seventh day, and it is very good. Actually, that's on the sixth day. But the point is, existence, life, it's good. It's a gift from God. um, Eternal life, the salvation is physical bodily resurrection to eternal life here in this world, renewed and restored. Um, so these things are fundamental opposites. Gnosticism is a rejection of the goodness of creation and the goodness of God in creating the world. It treats life and existence and creation as a curse to be escaped, and it's frankly, it's just evil. That's the fundamental reason why it's bad. And I often criticize modern Christianity for its Gnosticism, largely for the fact that it teaches that the goal of it is to escape into some other world, the spiritual world, as a disembodied soul or spirit, um, which is pretty much Gnosticism. But also, it treats, it's not just Gnostic in its objectives and goals and narrative framework. It's Gnostic in practice. Um, we're saved by grace through faith. Um, Typically, faith, I don't know about typically, but commonly, widely, faith is defined as believing the right things about God and Jesus. We
which
often have
is
these,
gnosis.
yeah,
Yeah.
we often have these discussions among Christians. Will often ask, well, what do you have to believe to be saved? The assumption being that salvation is a question of whether you hold the correct doctrines or not. Um, which genuine faith, I would say, it would be characterized, among other things, by holding the correct doctrines. But holding the correct doctrines is not in itself faith, and we often reduce it to that, as if, like, God will accept you or reject you based on which propositions you affirm, which misses the point. Faith means trusting Him. Faith is not an epistemology. It's not a question of what you know, and it's a question of whether you trust the one who has revealed himself. Um, it's so like the Calvinist idea of that regeneration precedes faith. Like, you have to be regenerated by the Holy Spirit in order to believe. Well, that's essentially Gnosticism. That's this idea that you get this mystical, sacred knowledge that's just denied to those who are outside of the elite, outside of the chosen ones. Um, when no, biblically, faith precedes regeneration. If you put your trust in God through Jesus Christ, then you are regenerated. Then you receive the Holy Spirit, and this can be communicated intelligibly and rationally by appeals to history and evidence, which is what you see modeled in the Book of Acts. So I think that and you can see this in like in things like the Epistle of Barnabas, which was that was included in in Codex Sinaiticus, which is the basis for modern Bibles. Basically, it was considered scripture. In the Epistle of Barnabas, he like the whole thesis of it is that Jews and Judaism are bad and wrong. They're wrong for interpreting the scriptures literally. What you should instead you should interpret it spiritually, and a lot of it has a ring of truth to it. Like he's arguing that, and by the way, it's not written by the actual Barnabas who appears in the New Testament. It was written much later and attributed to Barnabas, but his argument is basically that in light of Jesus Christ, all the stuff that the Jews read literally, it should instead be read spiritually. And it's kind of like we talk about Michael Heiser a lot, and I would recommend looking up this video because he explains it a lot better than I can about how modern Christians tend to read everything Jesus Christ into everything. Like they kind of project a lot of Christian theology back onto the Old Testament when it should be the other way around. We understand Jesus Christ in terms of what the Old Testament sets up. The Epistle of Barnabas kind of typifies this practice of just sort of ignoring the Jewish origins of it and projecting this supposed spiritual reading onto it. And it kind of it's not the Epistle of Barnabas, just to be clear, is not a Gnostic text, but it's sort of by this disparaging attitude toward the Jewish roots of the New Testament and of Christianity. It kind of paves the way for he's basically denying the kind of the Jewish interpretive paradigm of the Gospels. Like Jesus was a Jew teaching Judaism to Jews. If you're not starting with that understanding, you're gonna miss a lot. The Epistle of Barnabas this is after Judaism and Christianity kind of split off. And so there was a lot, and you see this in the Didache also, and all kinds of, and a lot of the early church fathers, there's this sort of disdain for Jews and Judaism, which was somewhat understandable given the circumstances. I'm not defending it entirely, but I understand it in the historical context why they would be that way. But it kind of established this attitude of reading the Bible and the Old Testament in particular in this sort of anti-Jewish way. Like there's this innovative way to understand it that is cut off from Judaism. I think that paved the way to interpret it all through a different sort of philosophical paradigm, that being Platonism and Greek philosophy in general, which kind of opened the door for a lot of these Gnostic ideas to creep into the church. So that by the time you get to the fourth century, like when you're reading Eusebius of Caesarea, who wrote the first church history, he's outright making fun of Papias of Hierapolis for believing in the Messianic kingdom instead of the by then standard idea of going away to heaven as a disembodied spirit, which is nowhere in the Bible at all. And so a lot of those Gnostic ideas persist today, and we got to get rid of them. We got to identify them and kind of cut them out of our thinking and return to that original Jewish understanding of who Jesus was and what he came to accomplish. So, yeah.
All right. Matt, you have anything to say as we wrap this up? Kind of what's your takeaway from this couple of hours that we've kind of just spoke on this thing?
Oh, wow. It's
Yeah.
been a couple hours.
Yeah. I think it was good to put maybe a face, maybe that's just being, you know, to put a a line or a circle around Gnosticism, because like we talked about, the word gets tossed around in our conversations quite a bit. Um, at least now we have a common language to use. So the next time we use it, it'll make more sense what's trying to be conveyed. I think that's good. I don't know that I have an opinion on Gnosticism broadly, other than it sounds like people were maybe eating mushrooms they shouldn't have been eating when they were when they were
It,
explaining some of these concepts, because they sound
it is
it's
hard to
it's
read.
it's
It's
funny
crazy.
because, for as supernatural as the Bible is, some of these Gnostic ideas make the Bible seem like an entree to real interesting stuff. I don't know. It's just
Well, it is very interesting to read like apocryphal gospels of any variety in comparison to the gospels. Like they
yeah.
seem like so much more like grounded and sober than those.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it makes it
Yeah.
makes it makes the Bible seem boring and passé from a
Well,
from a
their
supernatural
reason
point
will
of
be
view.
because it's exoteric. So it's base level. It's for you to understand. Like it
Right.
has to be grounded, sober, and boring because otherwise you won't understand what's going on.
Where you can't
So
get to
that's
the real stuff.
the point of
Yeah,
excuse me of gnosis and esotericness, right? So there's a graduation, and all the main
sure.
religions have it, right? So you get the Kabbalah in the Jewish faith, you have the Sufi with Islam, and you have Gnostic with Christianity. So
Interesting.
it's a graduated way of understanding more, and the and it is it's not without
That's an
it
interesting analogy. Yeah,
it's
and
not it's not without risk because now it gives people permission to go within, but you're not always right, right? So, I mean, we have all these cults and people that say, "Hey, God told me to kill this dude and do this thing to my family, or marry these people, or all these wacko things that God would never say." But
right.
because Joseph Smith, because Muhammad, because David Koresh, because Jim Jones said that Jesus talked to them, and that really is the danger in this esoteric sense and what the church fathers warned against.
Yeah.
Can you like I believe I understand you, Dre, but just so it's more explicit for the benefit of our listeners, can you kind of elaborate on that a bit? Like what do you
Elaborate on what part?
like just kind of like why would you like you don't agree with Gnosticism, you reject it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Like I know that. Like
Right.
what like
because
what
because because we talk about like, hey, I know Jesus and Jesus knows me. So there is an experiential factor to spirituality. And I think if you just go on ground level of mainstream Christianity, it's just about what you know and what you believe, right? You confess that our Lord and Savior died for our sins and he died on the cross and he woke up the third day and he's did all this for our salvation. And if you confess and believe that, then you are saved. And it's and I know we've spoke out against that many times on this show on what faith, grace through faith means, but that's kind of the watered down version. That's what mainstream Christianity says. It's kind of like they put the finish line at the beginning. Like, hey, I believe these things. I'm gonna dunk in water. Hey, good job, brother. You're saved. That's not the finish line, right? So there is there is an inner knowing. There is a way that you have to experience God, and you do need to speak to the Savior, and that's what the Holy Spirit is for, in my humble opinion. So I think, but these texts and these esoteric beliefs in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they go far and above and beyond. And you have to get the secret knowledge and the secret handshake and the different meditations and the contemplative prayer and all the things,
You have
right?
to you have to pay your money to do your audits to get the thetans out of your system so you can ascend the
Yeah.
ladder of
And
Scientology.
I don't know what the Hindu and the Buddhist versions of those are. Tantric, is
It,
that right?
well, tantric is that's a little different of a thing, but like I don't say that flippantly. I say that like there's nothing new under the sun. Like Scientology is basically a modern mystery religion, and Gnosticism is kind of in that same vein, as you have to kind of a lot of it was kind of a money-making scheme. I probably should have said this earlier in the
Yeah.
show, but there were all these mystery religions in the Roman and the Greek and Roman world where you kind of had to like you had to pay your way in, and you got little bits of knowledge, and then you paid some more and you got a little bit more knowledge.
So
Um,
why wouldn't sex or Christianity, capitalize? And I use
yeah.
that term on purpose, because a
Yeah.
lot of people think that the Jewish sacrificial system was the same thing, right? Which is why it was not only the money changers
Mm,
that Jesus cleansed the temple, but it was this animal sacrifice being, that's the way you cleanse yourself with God. And perhaps Jesus didn't think that way. Um,
well, he certainly affirmed the law of Moses in a
We'll, I
provisional
think we'll get
sense.
into that next week for sure. I think that will be the topic of next week: atonement, sacrifice,
Awesome.
Jesus affirming the law of Moses. That's going to be the crux of our show next week. So
And
we'll tease it a little bit
I
there.
like it. I
and,
like the tease.
and by the way, we did we this is a series we're doing to the listeners. This is are we doing this series? Do you want me
Well,
to?
we discussed it, right? So this goes back in the last few shows. You've heard me say that I'm not Christian, right? And then I think over the last week or so, I've decided, yes, I am. I am. So and screw fundamentalists and people that will tell me that I'm not Christian because of my beliefs. And that's kind of where
Uh,
this comes from. So there are things that I disagree with in the we'll call it mainstream Christianity. I don't think anything that we talk about on this show is really considered mainstream because Brian thinks the
uh,
church is completely fully corrupt. So uh,
yeah, I like
and
I
I think that's a badge of honor that I just gave him, right? Like
thanks.
me saying that he believes he's completely orthodox, which makes me think of orthodontist and straight teeth, straight thinking, straight teeth. Anyway, let's
I think there's an etymological commonality there. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
so
but yeah, I didn't
it,
mean to put you on the
no,
spot,
that's okay. So I,
but I did think
I
that was
declare I am Christian.
By the
Christian.
yeah.
by the
And,
way, I knew you'd say that.
so
um,
so here I am, and I will and people who are Christian listening to the show are going to listen to me over the next couple of weeks and just be like, no, you're not. You're you're a
I'm
heretic.
gonna be honest. I might be one of those people.
And
I don't know.
And
and you
also,
know what?
I
I
don't
knew
want to
you'd say
be.
that.
I don't care.
Yeah.
So
You
like
don't care.
because
You don't care if I think you're a Christian.
I think me saying I don't care is lack of a better term. It it's consequence because you're my friend, and it's consequence because I know you care about my salvation,
Yeah.
but it's not consequence in what I believe. And
Yeah,
I
I appreciate
and I
that.
think
And
that's what I mean by I don't care. I'm gonna
AKA,
believe what I believe based on the evidence that I see, and you can see through my progression over the last 10 years that I am open to change.
yeah, definitely. And I
So
and just a lot in that same vein, if I if it's and I don't honestly I don't know what you're going to say in the weeks to come. But if at some point I do say, Dre, you are not a Christian, I think you know that it will be with a broken heart out of my love for you, because
Right.
LOVE love.
And I will say you don't
I
have the fucking
desperately,
authority to say that to me. So I say this respectfully.
at, but at the same time, I will say in love,
Respectfully, of course.
because I care so much about you. I want you to be a Christian.
Right.
But for all I know, you're going to say stuff the next few weeks where I'm like, whoa, awesome. He's a Christian. This is great. This is the
I'm
greatest thing
not.
ever.
I am not going to do
He
that.
says I'm not. He goes, don't set your bar so high, Brian.
I will not. I will not.
All
But
right. Well, that's gonna, I look
but you
forward to
will
that
but you
with,
will have a full understanding of why I'm saying this,
all right. Well,
whether you agree or not.
I am both dreading this and looking forward to it.
Good.
But so it seems like we're wrapping up here.
Yeah, for sure. So what we talked about what Gnosticism is, where it comes from, how it was found, how it's discovered, um, and the different there's probably 12 different sects of this thing. So it really is an umbrella term, but really those three pillars that I had mentioned and Brian commented on, that really is the crux. And when you see some of the emanation words and you'll recognize them right away when you're reading any of these texts. Um, Sophia, Barlemo, Demiurge. There's a list of them, and maybe we can post a list of terms that if you see that, then it's a freaking Gnostic text. And yeah, let us know what you think. If we missed something,
Are there
if
any
we weren't
Gnostics out there?
if we weren't fair, if we weren't
There's
fair
a
to
lot
the
of
no,
Gnostics out
there
there,
are,
actually.
right?
That's my
If
point all
No,
along.
I meant in our listener base.
Yeah,
and
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
and really
anyway.
as I was going through this for the last 10-15 years, I'm like, Gnostic is just Christianity in a different package. They're saying the same damn thing. They just well, no,
I
this is I'm telling you about my progression, right? So they're saying the same thing. We have to escape this world because the world is fallen. And whether the god of this world is Satan because we have fallen into this, or it's the demiurge, it's the same concept. We have to free that and and move on to something else. And maybe Christianity has missed the mark on this line of thinking, but just because it sounds different doesn't mean that it is. The concepts at the basic level is the same. It's there is duality. We're fallen, we are earth scum, we are worms, and the only way that we can get out of that is to have Jesus save us. And in fact, Jesus can't even be a normal human because God, he got to be born of a virgin. He's got to be of God. And we have to have a whole fourth gospel to talk about how he was from the beginning. So
But then you realized,
I'll tell you what I realized next week.
huh?
By the way, I can attest to this entire process because I can't tell you how many 2 hour long conversations Dre and I have had where he's like telling me all this Gnostic stuff, and I'm like, and he's like, and then there's this other book by this guy, and he he said these things, and I'm like, what?
Man, I'm sometimes I'm mad that I didn't get station with you guys. But
No, this is just in the last couple. He said
Right.
the last 10 years.
uh,
Like a handful of these discussions we've had. I've been in the gym and I've got my Bluetooth on, and Dre's like telling me Gnostic stuff, and I'm
huh.
like, all right.
Because
Okay.
before I can call them heretics, I got to understand what they are. I got to know what they're saying
Sure.
and where it comes from and why they're saying what they're saying and where and how they. I mean, I think that Christianity started in such a small way and it became so worldwide. It stands to reason that all the cultures, especially of the known world at that time, are just going to blend into it. Because as you go further away from the life of Jesus, you're gonna have all these Gentiles in this Hellenistic world just be like, oh, that does make sense because Plato said this thing. And now if I no wonder Jesus came and proved Plato right, right? So, or these gods. Oh, maybe it's not all these gods. Maybe it is. There is one true God, but all these things that I believed about gods are exactly the same. It just comes. We just call it Yahweh instead. We just say it's Jesus and the Christ instead. And I think when you have all these cultures collide and people are trying to make sense of their own salvation, this is what you get.
I think I disagree with most of that.
Yeah, I don't care.
You don't care at all?
Not at all. No.
All right. Well, I'm gonna listen to this and come up with some responses.
Good.
But
Good. I invite them.
I would like to make a shameless plug
Okay.
for my blog. I just finished like a three-part series. It's a three-part series. What am I? Like an 80s teenager all of a sudden. It's called The Unsubverted Gospel. Parts 1, 2, and 3, which is this series. They're up on thethirdhelix.com. It's kind of Gnostic relevant, but I don't really talk about Gnosticism. I talk about the widespread lie of pseudo Christianity about going to heaven as disembodied spirits and why that's wrong and why it's not a trivial thing that it's wrong and what the actual gospel is and what the church should actually be doing in practical terms.
So why do you disagree with what I said?
Next episode.
I mean, I didn't say that it's correct. I'm saying it's what you get. I'm saying it's what we have. This collision of cultures that created this thing that we have right now. And why is that so disagreeable?
Well,
because Dre, if you say the word Gnostic and don't say is a lie, there's no other phrasing that Brian will accept.
Apparently.
I don't think that's fair.
You cut him off in the middle of a phrasing earlier to make him say, "But you don't agree with that, right?" And all he was doing was making a broad point.
I was describing it.
I didn't think I was cutting him off. I thought I was answering at the end of an idea, which you both do to me often, and I don't make I sometimes, but not usually.
Now you know what it's like.
I don't usually make a big deal out of it.
30 seconds, Brian. I spoke for longer than 30 seconds. I must have been done with my idea.
Right, because I don't let you guys talk. Okay, sure, guys.
The time I do, this is what happens.
So you want to save this for the next episode? Yes. Or you want me to answer you now?
No, right. Save it for the next episode.
So yeah, please comment. Let us know, and hey, let us know what you think Andre should talk about, in his heresy next. So I mean, I'm talking atonement.
You're gonna get a 5-part book written about you.
I hope so.
That's Andre's heresies
against Andre.
Yeah.
By Brian Urban.
I mean,
there's your next blog. You're welcome.
There was against heresies.
And I thought I was done blogging, but there it is.
Julian had his thing called against Marcion.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy.
That guy in particular.
Yes.
And the horse he rode it on.
And all he was doing was channeling Paul.
Brian,
fruits.
Don't do that. Don't do that. We were.
Hang on, Brian. You just said something you didn't say that earlier. You just said you thought you were done blogging. So you feel as if these last 3 blogs that you've written finally got all of the things out that you need to put out into the world. That's actually that's a selling point for people to go check your blog out. That's a big deal.
I made a post on Facebook saying like I might be done blogging forever because my entire brain is on the internet. But then as soon as it posted, I thought of like, oh wait, there's that other thing I was gonna do.
You know what that was? That was the Holy Spirit's like, man, shut up.
You ain't done. I ain't done with you. You got more. You got a lot more.
Got a lot more.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, with that, I will say, stay enlightened like Gnostics.
Shut up.
Stay curious.
Take it back. Repent.
And we will see you next week where I break down all my heresy. God bless. Have a great night.